Frailty is a syndrome. It's really an umbrella that encompasses a lot of moving parts. Unfortunately, we think that walking and doing that kind of gardening and doing that kind of thing is enough. It's really not when we're facing down certain frailty. I'm not trying to scare you. It's just what's going to happen unless you fight it. You can start walking today and you can start lifting weights today, making changes to your dietary habits and to your lifestyle to actively fight frailty. On this episode of the Dr. Tina Show, I'm going to talk to you about a topic you probably will not ever think about until you're 80, and that is frailty. I know it's not popular. I know you think, oh, this isn't her normal hormones and menopause and midlife and all that talk, but this is absolutely about all of it. We are all facing down frailty. It is ahead of all of us. And the difference between being robust and being frail could be as simple as one bad bout of flu. It could be one bad bout of COVID. It could be one bad injury that lands you in the hospital for a couple of weeks, because the process of laying on your back for several weeks while you recover from something will obliterate your muscle. The process of dealing with an infection of any sort, whether it's viral or bacteria, creates an inflammatory state in your body that will obliterate your muscle. Aging in and of itself will obliterate your muscle. Just because you're getting older and you're going through a process called inflammaging, which is this sort of combo of metabolic dysfunction that happens no matter what, because you are becoming more insulin resistant no matter what as you age, comboed with the aging process itself, you will become more frail. And frailty is not a great diagnosis as in a condition we can point to and say that person has frailty. Frailty is a syndrome. It's really an umbrella that encompasses a lot of moving parts. But we've normalized it so much in this country that when my mom was recently in the hospital, I went back through all of her medical records from that stay, because I have access. By the way, here's a pearl. You can ask for permission from your parent when they're with their doctor to have access to their chart if they have electronic charting. This hospital used my chart. I was able to go in and follow along in real time and see all of her lab markers and see all of her chart notes. Now, I don't know if that would make any difference to most of you, but if you're a clinician and you know what you're looking at, it was very telling, and I was able to keep up in real time. So before I even got to the hospital for the day, there was already a blood draw result in the chart. So anyway, in none of these chart notes did they mention her frailty. And I found it so surprising, because she went in frail. My mom's a little hotsy-totsy. She's out there doing heavy duty yard work, in her late 70s without any help from my dad, just pulling around giant bins of yard debris, big bags of yard debris. A week earlier, she was literally out there mopping up wet leaves, tons of wet leaves in the Oregon, early spring, late winter. So they've all started to decompose and it's just a big pile of heavy muck. And she's out there doing it. So she gets in her activity. Unfortunately, we think that walking and doing that kind of gardening and doing that kind of thing is enough. It's really not when we're facing down certain frailty. So I want to just implant this in your brain right now. You are facing down certain frailty. I'm not trying to scare you. It's just what's going to happen unless you fight it. And this is why I have been beating this drum over your head for the past 10 years to go to the gym. This is why when I came out online in 2016, when the big influencers at the time, who are still around, and I'm social with them, great people, they were telling you to do yoga and be vegan. And I was like, oh, hell no. Lift weights and eat steak. Deadlift and eat steak. That was my message in 2016. Not popular back then. And I tried to tell you all in 2020, because COVID was a very inflammatory process and it was obliterating the frail people. We were calling it the aged. Oh, it's the elderly people who are dying. No, the frail people are dying. The frail people with excess adipose who have no muscle, the frail people with diabetes, because when you become so frail that you actually start to have metabolic dysfunction from lack of good muscle mass, and definitely the elderly. because they're just frail. But the point is nowhere did they mention her frailty in her chart. And I think it's just because it's normalized. I think they're just like, oh, she's in her late 70s. So of course it's assumed frailty. It's crazy to me that we've normalized this so much. And then when we see the unicorn, we see the 80-year-old woman or man and they're in super good shape. We're like, oh my gosh, you're an anomaly. No, they're not an anomaly. That's not necessary to decompose while you're still alive. Like, it's not necessary to have everything shut down. And this was a real wake-up call for me because my mom, she doesn't listen to me. She lifted weights. Actually, she did. In her 50s and 60s, she was very active in the gym. And then she quit several years ago. And I've been on her saying, Mom, you're getting frail. And she's like, leave me alone, Tina. No, I'm not. I mean, you wouldn't want me as your daughter because I would harp on you. But I harp on her and she tells me to leave her alone. And that's fair. She keeps herself active though. And even she is succumbing to that process. And I'll tell you what kind of the cardinal signs are in a minute. And I'll get into some studies that will scare the bejesus out of you. And I hope they do because I want you to go to the gym. I want you to be active. Now, if you're a farmer, I get this question a lot from my followers because my husband is a farmer and he is strong as heck and he's very active on the farm. And we make sure he gets adequate farm time between Arizona and Oregon. We get him back to work on the farm so that he can stay active. But I get asked this a lot, like, what if I'm, carrying big buckets of feed around or watering the animals? Like, a lot of people in my community have land and have animals and they want to know, is that enough? I think that's safe to say. If you're really physically active in your day-to-day, if you're really physically active on the job, I've had some blue-collared workers that were, really physically active, then yeah. But most Americans are not, and most elderly folks are definitely not. And some parts of the world, the active elders are so active that they can get away with smoking and drinking. It's no problem because they're so active in their day-to-day, or they're walking an extensive amount, or they're, watering the animals, feeding the animals. I mean, they're staying active, and we just don't have that really built into our society. So the only thing we really do have is going to exercise. And that's the gym. You can exercise at home. You can have home workout programs, but just physically taxing your muscles every day. Now, it doesn't have to be crazy heavy and it doesn't have to be crazy excessive, but it does need to happen, and it needs to happen regularly. And so when it doesn't, we have a lot of things sort of fighting against us. We have age and just cellular oxidation, cellular aging processes, cellular and body-wide inflammation, muscle starting to deteriorate, metabolic compromise leading to further muscular deterioration. Your muscles become pathologic when you're metabolically unwell. So you just get you get marbled muscle, you get fatty infiltrate in your muscle, and that creates a pro-inflammatory milieu, which further degrades the muscle down, and it's a big mess. And this is why we need healthy, well-trained skeletal muscle that we actively work on building. Malnutrition is huge as we're aging. This one's really close to my heart because I've seen it with so many patients, and I'm somebody who's an undereater. My mom's an undereater, and it could be for a ton of reasons. You could have gut issues. You could just not. I'm just not that into food, The only time I'm into food is when I'm stressed out of my mind and my hormones are off and I'm like, give it to me. Let me eat it. It's wild though, how malnourished elderly folks become. It's really heartbreaking. They don't want to cook for just one person if they've lost their partner. That's a big one I hear. They might have dentition issues. That's a real issue. And that's very common. And so eating hurts, or they're missing teeth, or there's all kinds of reasons there, and very common. Another one would be that they start to lose their taste buds. And so, or their ability to have their taste buds adequately sensing. And that happens because of mineral deficiencies. So they become zinc deficient, they become magnesium deficient, and they just can't really taste the food anymore. So it doesn't taste that good. Everything kind of starts to taste bland. That terrible state we were all in most of us were in after COVID, where our taste buds got messed up and nothing tasted right. Well, that starts to happen as you age if you become mineral deficient. And the less you eat, the more mineral deficient you become. You see it's kind of a downward spiral there. And it's really unfortunate. So all of these things add up, and there's more, but these are just some of them. Maybe they've become less social. Maybe they've lost their friends. I've had many patients tell me all my friends are dead. I outlived everybody because I tried to stay healthy and they all passed away. And so they're just not, people don't want to eat alone all the time. People don't want to cook for one. People don't, they start eating canned food or maybe preparing less meals and just sort of eating more convenience food and ultra processed food. So the nutrition goes down. Your stomach lining starts to atrophy as you become older, and your B12 needs healthy stomach lining, and the intrinsic factor that the stomach lining secretes is necessary for absorption of B12. And so, and multiple other nutrients, just kind of your whole gut, your whole intestinal lining starts to atrophy just like the rest of your body. And so you become more malnourished because of a lack of absorption overall. There's lots of different mechanisms along the way. Maybe they've got some gastrointestinal issues and absorption issues downstream. There's just a myriad of things that can be happening that lead to the frail state. And the reason this is important, and the reason I was like trying to drive this down people's throats during COVID, is because we had the data that frail folks were not winning the battle. And again, it's multifactorial, but if you know that frailty is upon you and you know that a battle with an illness will put you into a more frail state, no matter how buff and strong and robust you start out as. We've all seen it. We've all seen the pictures, or we've seen it with people we know. They get sick with something and they just waste away very quickly, because some of these infectious processes are very pro-inflammatory. Some of these just illnesses overall can be very much a muscle wasting state. And so you don't, if you go in without a lot to go on, you're going to come out with a lot less, if at all. And I was saying through COVID, how you enter into any illness is how you will deal with it as you go through it and how you'll come out the other side, right? Like how you handle it in the middle, how your body chooses to handle it is very dependent on your metabolic health and your muscle mass and the healthier muscle. And the healthier muscle is dependent on your metabolic health, and your metabolic health is dependent on the healthier muscle. And you see the situation. And so how you go into any illness or any battle is going to determine how you traverse it and how you come out the other side, if you come out the other side. And that's just the hard reality of biology. That's not me judging. That's just biology. Here's the caveat. My mom went in with some degree of frailty. She really got sick, and I've shared this, so I'm allowed to talk about that part, but I won't give any more details. She got through it by the grace of God. Here's the other one, after a decent hospital stay. The longer someone remains in hospital, the higher the risk of them dying. And it might be from secondary infections they pick up along the way in the hospital that are more prevalent there, like C. difficile or pneumonia or whatever, MRSA. But really just that bedridden state and not being in your surroundings and not being with your support system and a lot of other factors. My mom really perked up when she got home and saw her dog. It was like, that makes me cry. She was so happy to see her dog. I was about to sneak her dog in. It was the funniest part. We were like day 4 in the hospital, day 5, and she still wasn't quite coming around yet. And some lady popped her head in and she's like, "Hi, I'm from the whatever department. I have a therapy dog. Do you want to pet the dog?" And I was like, "Yes." I was literally, because I was here without my dogs too, and I had no dogs. I was like, I need dog petting. I got so excited. Like I went and pet that dog before the dog even got to my mom. I was like, yes, I need therapy dogs. She got to see a lot of therapy dogs there, which was really cool. But they have little cards. So we collected all the little cards of the therapy dogs. Thank you, therapy dogs. Thank you to everybody who helped my mom through that. That was miraculous if anyone sees this. But here's the deal. She comes out, significant muscle loss, significant wasting, significant frailty, induction, even further. And had there been a second battle ahead, if you know what I mean, had there been like a cancer or something else that was the reason for landing her in there, she likely would not have had the reserves to fight it. And that was wrecking me. Like it was just wrecking my soul to know that we didn't really know what had caused the situation to happen. And it turns out that, thank God, like it's all clear and she's good. She's good. I mean, for right now, she's good. And we are going to, and keep on that path. But had things been different and there was a devastating diagnosis, having the reserves to then have to go through that battle. And that's why I'm doing this episode today, you guys. That's why I'm so passionate about this. It isn't just the first battle. It isn't just the first, like, oh my gosh, because it's not always just one battle. And you have probably seen this with loved ones or yourself. Sometimes people go in and like there's a terrible car accident and they get through it, but then there's like surgery after surgery after surgery after surgery to rebuild things or to repair things or to get them to a place where they're, in a decent state of health. And all of those are huge, massive hits to the system. And every time you have to go under general anesthesia, it's a massive stress hit to your brain. And so going into any kind of unforeseen battle or known battle for that matter, going into childbirth, going into, having a big surgery, there's all kinds of things that we walk into and walk through, and we will walk through them better if we go in and we're not in a frail state. Frailty starts at age 50. I was looking at one of the many studies I pulled up for this podcast, and frailty was starting in the 50s, the early 50s, most predominantly in women. So frail younger women and then really frail older women. Frailty is more prevalent in women, and frailty in men and women in their elder years. And it's terrible. And something I have seen clinically over and over again. I had the great honor of taking over my mentor's practice, and my mentor had the great honor of caring for many patients for many decades. And so I inherited all of them. I inherited this whole crew of really awesome, healthy seniors who were just amazing people who'd been taken care of by Dr. Rick for a long time. And then I got to take care of them too and step in. And I watched, but these folks were now in their later years. They were in their 70s and 80s and 90s. And I watched several of them descend into dementia. And there's a very strong link between frailty and dementia. And in fact, some of the studies I was looking at was showing that up to, roughly 10 years prior to the dementia diagnosis, the frailty had shown up. And so I always say that frailty is the harbinger of doom. And it's the kiss of death, like truly. And I mean that, like it's the kiss of death. If the reaper's around, they're coming for the frail folks. It's terrifying. And it's one of those things that once you're behind the ball, it's very hard to catch up. Frailty is kind of like that one step forward, two steps back situation. And it's, the hit and then the second hit and the third hit and the fourth hit. And so my mom will come out of this, and she is. But the next illness that comes along, she will not be having the reserves that she had she not had this hit. So it's this multi-hit kind of scenario. And I know that sometimes that's unavoidable. But we have one defense against this, and that is to train. I mean, literally, to eat well and to train. And when I say train it, that encompasses everything. Training isn't just strength training. It is the food that you eat to make the muscle. It's the water you drink. It's the sleep you get. It's the process of thinking like an athlete and training for what will come. Something is going to come knocking for you. And if you walk into that something with frailty, even at a young age, even the data, I mean, you guys remember when I got deplatformed for trying to pound the drum around metabolic health being the driver of COVID and the poor outcomes with COVID, which it definitely was. I mean, we had data before COVID really hit our shores. We had conclusive data out of China that it was obliterating those who were diabetic. So I tried to share that information. I got censored. I tried to share it out. I got censored. I got louder. I got deplatformed. I mean, they did not want any of us knowing there was something we could do to protect ourselves besides masks and stay home and freak out and then take the intervention they were going to serve up later. Like there was no discussion. And had I not been on the receiving end of that massive censorship industrial complex coming down upon me, and man, it went deep. I will share it someday, but I know I've said it, I have too much PTSD from it. I can't even talk about it with my husband without, I get so worked up. They were trying to silence people like me who were trying to tell you to go get metabolically optimized. And it's not that hard. Like, it's a stepwise process, but it's not that hard to really start to see changes happening on labs and see changes happening in your body and how you feel. I have so many clients, you guys, and patients over the years that want me to run their blood a month after they start with me, or 2 months later, or a month after they start a GLP-1, or a month after they start some kind of treatment protocol that we're working on. And I'm like, no, give it 90 days, because the labs will not really show much for 90 days and you'll be disappointed. But the whole 90 days leading up to it, they're feeling better. Their face inflammation is coming down. Their joints are feeling better. Like, everything's going better in their life. Their sleep is better. Their libido is better. They're feeling better and their mood's better. Anxiety's lower. All the good things are happening. And then the lab doesn't show any changes if we run them too soon. And then they get disappointed and they think, oh, it was all for want. It was for nothing. And I'm like, are you kidding? You've been telling me you've been raving for 3 months about how great you feel. So the differences can happen before the lab values do. And the improvements can take place before the lab values shift favorably. So yes, you can start walking today, and you can start lifting weights today at home with bands and with free weights. And you can start making changes to your dietary habits and to your lifestyle to actively fight frailty. That is the enemy. Frailty is the enemy. It is the kiss of death and the harbinger of doom. And if I could put a face to it or a caricature, it would definitely be the Grim Reaper. That is frailty. When I see frailty kind of coming for someone, I'm like, oh no, you have to fight. And if you don't, then outcomes are poor, really poor. So let's look at some of the data. I'm just going to say it. I get accused of being a fearmonger. I'm going to scare the crap out of you, hopefully, in the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, because we have got to quit normalizing frailty in our elderly. And we've got to quit normalizing it in our young people. I would say, I was just watching the Coachella footage, and there's so many wafy girls, and this whole Ozempic thing, people are getting really hung up. I'm just going to say this. I know that a lot of you misinterpreted it and thought, well, Dr. Tina said Ozempic's safe. GLP-1s are safe. I was talking about a very specific strategy that is not being followed by most people. Most people are, those are two different beasts. And I've been trying to say this, taking copious amounts, I don't think, not my favorite idea, not something I would do. I understand some people need to do it. Absolutely no shade. The strategy I've been talking about has been a very different one. And I've written blogs about it on my Substack, so I'm not going to get into it here. I've tried to break it down there in detail so you guys can go read that. It's substack.com, Dr. Tina, or Dr. Tina. I'll put the link in the show notes. Anyway, you can find me on Substack. You can go read there's a little look at the top. It says GLP-1s. Go read the articles I've written. Different strategy completely. And I think they're very dangerous when people are using them to the extreme and abusing them, which we're seeing, right? And there's this whole thing happening online where, the fitness influencers and the different people who are like very concerned about how thin everyone's getting, especially in Hollywood. And we're seeing it in the celebrities, and we're seeing people getting incredibly thin. It's very much that early 90s aesthetic of like, get as thin as possible, right? And we're seeing it, and they're concerned about body positivity, and they're concerned about how young girls are going to, look at their own bodies and all of these things. And all of those are legitimate concerns. All I see is frailty. And I'm like, good luck with your broken hip and your diabetes, honey, because it is not going to go well for you. And when I see women my age, like the Tori Spellings and the Christina Applegates getting really, really thin, I'm like, oh, that hip fracture is not far off. It's so bad, you guys. Demi Moore, everybody was so aghast, I can't believe how thin she is, and she looks so strange. And she showed up at one of the awards recently, and she's bone thin. And everybody's so concerned about the message she's sending and that we should age gracefully. And all of this commentary I've seen, and not one person has said, I'm concerned she's going to break a hip. I'm concerned about her frailty. I'm concerned about the metabolic dysfunction that's going to come from being so underweight. There's skinny fat, which is TOFI is another term, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And then there's obesity. And when you look, it's a U-shaped curve for mortality, meaning risk of death from all cause is actually higher in the really, really thin people with no muscle. It's not a good place to be. I used to live there. I spent years in that skinny fat state. And it is, I just wrote an article about it on my Substack, and it is such a dangerous place to be. And so we have to just look at the reality of the situation and look in the mirror and be like, am I well muscled or am I not? This isn't about aesthetics. This isn't about rocking a bikini. This isn't about, you doing any big competitions in your middle-aged years. Like, I just want y'all to stay strong and not break a hip. For real, for real. So until we start charting frailty in charts and we start actually calling a spade and we start having conversations, if you're a clinician listening to this, are you discussing frailty with your patients? It's a vital sign, in my opinion. Their muscle mass, their muscle quality, it's a vital sign, and nobody's talking about it. When they pulled up my mom's sleeve and had to put the child's cuff on her arm, I was like, oh no, this is not good. And then to see her weight when she entered hospital and her weight when she came out, like, and, she's bringing it back on. Appetite's back online, thank God. And she's doing okay. But I say this because this is super common and nobody talks about it. Even when I talk to my friends who are telling me about what they're going through with their parents, they'll explain the whole situation that happened in the hospital and what do you think? And they want to do this procedure and what do you think? And I'm always like, how's their frailty? How's their muscle mass? Oh, she's, lost 10 pounds in the past week. It's like, yeah, should we really be thinking about doing such a hardcore procedure in that state? Or should we send them home and beef up a little bit, send them back? We have to talk about this because it's real, it's happening, it's normalized, and it's deadly. Okay, so what do we got here? So the World Health Organization, 2018, nearly 1 in 3 adults globally is physically inactive. So people are not moving very much. Up to 50% of people over 80 have significant muscle loss. By age 85, close to half of adults are frail. That's pretty crazy. So this isn't about aesthetics. This is about you having autonomy and control as you age. What I ask my patients, I'll say to you, do you want someone wiping your ass when you're 80? If you make it that far, do you want someone else wiping your ass besides you? I do not. So I want to know who I am, and I don't want a stranger wiping my ass. And I think about that all the time. When I'm in the gym, I'm like, I am training because I don't want to break a hip. Most folks who break hips either die in hospital of pneumonia or some complication, or, now let me back up. I shouldn't say most folks die. Most folks die or. So they either very high risk of death after breaking a hip, or they don't come back very well. And so that's huge. That encompasses a huge portion of people who break hips. Very rarely have I seen folks bounce back and they're like full on again. Usually they're younger. Usually the hip was like much more of less of a frailty situation and more of like a true accident. Whereas in frailty, the stumble and fall is due to the frailty, right? It's the muscles, they've lost type 2 fibers. Their joints aren't reacting quickly. The frailty was ultimately what led to them sort of stumbling and falling. There's some speculation that the break happens before the fall does in some cases. So now if it's you or me and we jumped off a cliff and we broke our hip, then our chances of bouncing back are higher. But when it comes to elderly folks who have frailty, which most do, well, 50% of those by age 85 are frail, then they don't come back so good, or they don't come back at all. And I've heard terrible stories. And often they're in the hospital. I've heard stories so bad where they were so frail and brittle that they couldn't do surgery to reset the bone. They couldn't get it in. It was broken. They couldn't do surgery to reset it. So they're lying there in agonizing pain with their hip dislocated and fractured for days as their lungs fill up with fluid and they die of pneumonia. That happened to my friend's grandma, like not that long ago. It's awful. It's awful. I would not wish that upon anyone. And to know that it was very likely preventable is just, it's why I'm beating the drum, people. I'm not going to stop beating it. So frailty is, like I said, it's a syndrome, and it's defined by weakness, slowing down. So slowness. People start to slow down. They get more fatigue. They're tired out more easily. They don't want to get up as much. falls and stumbles. So people start tripping around the place or falling, and then unintentional weight loss. The sarcopenia, or the wasting of the muscle, the unintentional weight loss, is like part of the syndrome, but it doesn't always equal frailty. It's the whole syndrome. It's the weakness and the slowness and the fatigue. And I would add to that isolation and cognitive changes, because they go hand in hand. They're like two sides of the same coin. The frailty, like I said, the frailty shows up before the cognitive changes.